Hello, everybody. Thanks for attending. My name is Mel Slater. I'm from the University of Barcelona, and I'm very pleased to introduce this series of seminars on towards a metaverse for social change. So this is an online seminar series. This is the very first one of this series. It's in collaboration with Frontiers in Virtual Reality, and we'll come back to that in a moment. Just to let you know, this is being recorded. So if you prefer not to be recorded, this is an advance notice. Or if you know someone who wanted to see it, or if you want to watch it again yourself, it will eventually be on the web page of this project, GuestXR, which I'll talk about soon. So now I'm going to pass you, but before I do that, I'm just going to show you the rest of the series. So they're basically every week now until the 26th of June. You can see the list here, and it's going to be advertised in the same place that you found this one. So now I'm going to pass you over to Marta Campingotto, and she's going to talk about the frontiers.
Thank you, Mel. Can you hear me fine? Um, I'm very happy to introduce Frontiers in Virtual Reality, who is collaborating with GuestXR in developing this series of webinar. My name is Marta, and I'm the journal manager of Frontiers in Virtual Reality, who is an open access journal that was launched in 2020 and currently led by Professor Mel Slater. The journal explores various aspects of virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, and it welcomes submissions in all its specialty sections that are listed in bold, as you can see in the slides. The journal is indexed in Scopus, Web of Science, and DOAJ, among others, and it currently has an impact factor of 3.2. We are expecting the new impact factor at the end of this month. Some contacts information on the right of this slide. Mel, you can move forward to the next slide, please. Just wanted to introduce all the people that are collaborating and supporting this journal, in particular our esteemed specialty chief editors of all the 6 sections on the top part of the slide that support us in the journal team to develop high quality content in the journal, also through our rigorous and transparent peer review process. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just some highlights of the current content. Just wanted to share with you some of our most viewed research topics, meaning our article collection that work as special issues, and just some of our most cited papers. We now have more than 740 papers, and the journal was launched only at the end of 2020. So it's a very good sign, and the journal is growing substantially. Finally, in the last slide, just wanted to mention this current research topic led by our esteemed topic editors team, also the speaker of today, that is related to the previous series of webinars organized in 2024. It is still open. It received a lot of submission, but it is still open for submission. So in case you're interested to submit a paper, these are just some contacts. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of the webinar.
As I mentioned at the beginning, this series of seminars is organized by the European project GuestXR. The idea of GuestXR is that there's meetings in virtual reality, but any meeting always has an objective, even if it's just for people to hang out and have fun, that's still an objective. Or if it's something like a business meeting to reach a decision about some particular problem. So meetings always have objectives. And the idea of GuestXR is that there's meetings in extended reality, and there's an AI agent behind the scenes watching over things and trying to make sure that the meeting does reach its objectives. So the AI agent may be represented in many different forms. I mean, for example, if the meeting is going off the topic, it may intervene as a virtual character that says, "Oh, let's return to the main topic," or it could just be introducing some music or changing colors of the environment, whatever. So this has been going on now for 3.5 years. We're in our final year now, and this every year we organize this sequence of topics. So, um, and the web you can find the web page very easily by just typing GuestXR into Google. So, I'm very pleased today to introduce Esan Tutunku. She is going to speak about some of the work we did in Barcelona on beyond debate, role playing in virtual reality for shifting perspectives and resolving conflict. Esan is a PhD student here in the University of Barcelona. She has had a very good time, very productive time being a PhD student. She spent several months at Google headquarters near Seattle. She's currently speaking to us from San Francisco, where she's working with Autodesk on creative computing, and she's contributed in a very profound and interesting and creative way to the Guest XR project. So she's going to tell you about one experiment that we did here in Barcelona, which is about conflict resolution. So now I pass you over to Esan.
All right. So, as Mel mentioned, today I would like to talk about the theme of role play in virtual reality for shifting perspectives and resolving conflict. This is one of the part of my PhD research and is something of my great interest as well. And I want to start off with how debate alone falls short in many cases, because we often assume that good conversation leads to common ground. But the more emotionally charged the issue, the more people retreat into fixed roles. We become defenders, opponents, accusers, because these roles shape how we argue and how we listen. So we could also say we don't just argue from beliefs, we argue from roles. But what if we could step outside of this role? Today, we explore how virtual reality can offer a radical alternative, stepping into somebody else's shoes and body to see a conflict from the inside out. This is the promise of VR in this context. Because VR isn't just about games, it's a powerful tool for creating immersive experiences. And within this, there are two key concepts that make it so effective. So the first one is the embodiment, the feeling of actually being in a virtual body, perhaps one quite different from our own. And the second element is presence, the sensation of being in that virtual environment. And throughout this presentation today, we'll explore how these capabilities allow VR role play to shift perspectives and help resolve conflicts in ways that maybe traditional methods can't. To go over the agenda of today, so we're going to start off with VR and perspective taking, and then we're going to look into the role play and education. We will look into the conflict resolution theory and the literature around it. And then, as Mel mentioned, we're going to talk about an experiment that we did in our university regarding climate change and polarization. And then we're going to dive into what AI and mediation can do in these themes. And finally, we're going to wrap it up with discussions and questions. So, what exactly is perspective taking? It's more than just sympathy. It's this cognitive leap of imagining the world through somebody else's eyes, understanding their thoughts, their feelings, and motivations. It's fundamental for empathy, for breaking down stereotypes, as a research by Galinsky and Moskowitz have shown, and for building constructive social interactions. So another study also found that it almost leads to merging of self and other in our minds. And one of the most profound ways VR enhances perspective taking is through embodiment. So, as we said, it's the sensation of owning and controlling a virtual body, which can be quite distinct from our own physical selves. This experience allows us to quite literally experience being the other. And there have been many works in this theme, many explorations. So the foundational idea here is that our physical experiences shape our minds. In this paper by Meister and Al, titled "Changing Bodies Changes Minds," they reviewed how owning another body, even a virtual one, affects our social cognition. So the illusion of body ownership in VR, where visual and sensory motor feedback aligns to make us feel like the avatar is us, can lead to changes in how we perceive ourselves and others, and even how we process social information. So this isn't just about seeing differently, it's about feeling differently because our perceived physical form has changed. Another example is from 2013, and it's titled "Putting Yourself in the Skin of a Black Avatar Reduces Implicit Bias." So this study provided a compelling evidence for this in a more social context. White participants who embodied a black avatar in VR subsequently showed a reduction in their implicit racial bias, which was measured by the implicit association test. This suggests that the first-person experience of being in the skin of an outgroup member can challenge deeply ingrained unconscious bias that we have in a way that maybe simply imagining or being told about another's experience might not. And also, further reinforcing these findings, a 2016 study was looking into whether these effects were sustained. So, this was a crucial follow-up, suggesting that the effects of such embodied experiences aren't just fleeting. So, the reduction in implicit bias was observed not only after the VR experience, but also a week later, indicating a more lasting impact on the participants' cognitive associations. This, I think, also points to the potential of VR embodiment for a more durable attitude change that we can foster in individuals. So VR also creates immersive environments. You're not just imagining, you're there. I'm gonna briefly play a video. This video is 360. So this is titled The Displace, and it's a VR film created by the New York Times that offers an immersive 360-degree perspective on the lives of displaced children from South Sudan, Syria, and Ukraine. So the film, which actually was the first VR experience by the New York Times, was designed to be viewed using a cardboard headset. And these cardboards were distributed to subscribers with pre-assembled Google Cardboard sets. So it was this kind of like first example of its kind. And it's an 11 minutes production, and I highly recommend seeing it. It's a great example that we can see how you can experience this like 360 of immersive environments in a more general journalistic setting. To kind of give more examples in this realm, Hassler and colleagues have demonstrated how immersive 360 videos can significantly change viewpoints in conflict scenarios. So their findings showed that this immersive experience, had a significant impact on changing viewpoints, even moral judgments related to the conflict, compared to less immersive ways of presenting the information. So this 360 video actually allowed participants to witness events from a first-person perspective within the conflict zone, which ended up fostering a deeper, almost like more visceral understanding of the situation. And as another example, similarly, Gallego Abeyan and Al in 2024 study explored immersive documentary journalism. So they compared the impact of experiencing a story about undocumented young immigrants in Spain in 360 VR versus a traditional 2D screen display. And they found that the VR experience led to different and most of the times even stronger responses in the participants. The immersive nature of VR, which at the end of the day allows participants to feel present in the migrants' environment and witness their stories more directly, had a distinct effect on their engagement and potentially their empathy towards migrant situations. So, with all these examples, as I mentioned, there is increased empathy. Both in a cognitive way, so the understanding way, and also affective in the feeling part. So Hare and Bailenson work showed VR can build long-term empathy more effectively than traditional methods. And in another study, Bertrand and colleagues explored multiple VR strategies for training empathy. Now I'm going to kind of dig more into a few examples of studies to kind of contextualize the situation. So in more detail, let's take Guy and Bailenson 2006 study, Walk a Mile in Digital Shoes. So in their experiments, participants embodied avatars that experience social stigma. For instance, avatars depicting an elderly person or someone with physical disability. In the study, they found that this embodied experience led to significant reduction in negative stereotypes towards the group the avatars represented. Participants who, for example, experience the world as an elderly person in VR, which means like moving slower or perhaps experiencing simulated visual impairment, later showed more positive attitudes and behavior towards the elderly compared to control groups. So this study sort of highlighted how direct embodied experiences in VR can be more impactful than simply imagining another's perspective. Before we dive deeper into VR, it's important to acknowledge that role play itself has been long been a cornerstone of effective education. It is a powerful method that moves students from passive recipients of information to active participants in their own learning. So, as we said, one of its primary benefits is active learning and engagement. So, instead of just listening or reading, the students are doing, which naturally boosts attention and motivation. And another thing is skill practice. It's an invaluable tool for skill development. We could think about the complex, like the interpersonal skills, like negotiation, communication, or problem solving. So in one work, Andrew and Meligrana, they specifically evaluated role-playing simulations for teaching negotiation skills to university students, highlighting its effectiveness in this area. In another study, they found that how interactive drama and role play can teach conflict resolution skills to middle and high school students. Another good part of role playing education is that it is a safe environment for experimentation. Students can try out different approaches, make mistakes, and learn from them without the real world consequences that might occur in genuine high stakes situations. In this kind of, I want to open a little parentheses and show a little TV series that have been going for the last 2 years, which I think is almost like a humorous way and humorous take on these practices that we can see. It's called The Rehearsal, and it's basically inspiring from this idea that any social context can be rehearsed in order to have easier way of engaging. So
I've been told my personality can make people uncomfortable. Hey, how to make love all night.
Oh, well,
I think we're gonna get along pretty well. But I've learned that if you plan for every variable, a happy outcome doesn't have to be left to chance. This conversation's going pretty well.
Yes.
So that's no accident. Everything that's happened today, I've rehearsed it. Hey, hi, Nathan. Dozens of times. In a replica of your home. This is what we can do for you and you.
Of course, this is kind of like humorous take on it, but it is true that even looking in the mirror or role playing in front of a camera is really a tool for you to improve your social skills or
I've been told my personality.
Okay, so another advantage when it comes to role play in education is um, leading to a better understanding, a deeper understanding, and an increased retention of complex concepts and social dynamics. Abstract theories become more tangible because instead of just reading and listening to them, you're actually kind of acting them out. And when you enact to them, you can have a profound kind of conceptualization inside your head as well. So even in its traditional form, role play encourages a rudimentary form of perspective taking, as students have to consider the motivations and behaviors of the character they are portraying. And finally, these sessions are often followed by debriefs. So it kind of facilitates crucial feedback and reflection, which even more solidifies the learning process. So this is almost like a rich foundation that if we were to introduce VR technologies, it almost can supercharge the potential that it holds. If we were to now bring VR back into the mix, the benefits hopefully and presumably can get amplified, right? Because VR offers a safe space to practice difficult conversation. For example, like imagine tackling a workspace conflict or a sensitive negotiation without real world repercussions. You can repeat scenarios, try different approaches. It allows for this highly realistic and customizable scenarios. We can simulate complex dynamics that would be quite hard to replicate otherwise. So in one study, Chong and colleagues explored this in a series games for conflict modeling. So, um, and at the same time, to kind of go for the following step, the engagement factor is huge. So students are often more motivated by these immersive experiences. In one study, they found that VR's power for social and emotional learning by putting the students in the shoes of another. And crucially, it's embodied learning. So you're not just reading about it, you are doing it. So if we were to reimagine conflict pedagogy with such tools, or if we were to look into now a different scenario, it can really allow us to be able to better understand these kind of like high stake or even psychologically weighing situations. So a great example of this technology enhanced role play for conflict resolution is this paper from 2024 called Rehearsal by Sheikh and colleagues. It's screen based, so it's not VR, but its principles are highly relevant, I think, because it immerses users in workplace conflict scenarios, like a supervisor addressing an employee's poor performance. So the users navigate the dialogue by choosing responses, and the system provides immediate feedback on the conflict resolution strategies their choices represent, such as power or positive expectations. And I think the crucial part of this study is that it offers counterfactuals. So alternative responses to users that could have made and even like fast forwards to show the projected outcome of those different choices. So this kind of allows this dynamic learning environment and about like the communications impact into relations. And the goal of this study or this experiment is to build practical skills by actively stimulating conflicts and reflecting on different strategic approaches. A model could be powerfully amplified if we were to kind of bring this kind of a system back into a VR environment. Um, Before we move even further, it is important to consider ethics. I think while VR can be a powerful tool, especially a powerful empathy tool, it's not a magic bullet. It's something that we have to take for with always thoughtfulness and a consideration. So Zayu and colleagues ask if it's moral enhancement with the freedom to fall. So what this means is that can these experiences also be distressing or misused if not designed carefully? And also another 2022 paper by Sora Demonjo. There he talks about disrupting the empathy machine. So, and in the paper, he highlights both the potential and like the power and the potential perils. So we need thoughtful design and facilitation for sure. So with this being said, let's slowly move towards connecting this to the established conflict resolution theory. So the core principles include in the conflict resolution the active listening, which is the crucial distinction between stated positions and the underlying interests. And then the idea of principled negotiation. This term was popularized by the Harvard Negotiation Project. And these things are the central, and along with this, we have the central role of empathy and the goal of finding mutual gain. So these are the things that actually kind of like motivates the process of conflict resolution. So to kind of like go even one step further, effective communication is the heart of conflict resolution. It's no brainer, and like I think it's quite obvious out there. And I think in that context, VR provides a controlled environment to practice vital skills like this, like active listening, truly hearing what the other party is saying, both verbally and non-verbally. So if you have nuanced expressions on your avatars, you don't have to only rely on verbal communication. You can also be able to kind of intake and interpret the non-verbal communication. So in this context, users can experience and experiment with assertive communication, learning to state their needs and boundaries respectfully, and also practicing giving and receiving constructive feedback. And all this without the pressure of the real life confrontation. This ties back to our first theme on the perspective taking. So in VR, you're not just imagining what's it like to be the other person in a conflict. Once again, you embody them. So you can experience the situation from their visual point of view, hear the things as they would, and potentially even experience stimulated emotional states tied to that role. This embodied understanding of the other side's perspective is, I think, far more profound and at the end of the day can unlock new insights that are difficult to achieve otherwise. To kind of give an example of this, in this realm of work, there's one study from 2024 by Young and Al called A Change of Scenery. So it's exploring, for me, fascinating application. So retrospective VR, embodied perspective taking. So participants who had recently experienced an interpersonal conflict were invited to re-experience that conflict in VR, but this time they embodied other person involved in the disagreements. So they could see and hear the interaction unfold from the other's visual and auditory perspective. So participants reported a greater understanding of the other person's viewpoints, as well as their motivations and also their emotional state during the conflict. And for like this, in the result, it was reduced anger and also increased empathy and greater willingness to reconcile and find common ground. I think like this study really demonstrates the potential, not just for general empathy building, but sort of directly addressing and reframing specific past conflicts as well. And to kind of give you a third perspective or step into a practice ground for conflict resolution, it's the idea of incorporating, like training the mediators, because mediators and peace building applications are the core part when we are addressing conflicts. And I think for mediators, it can be a really great tool for allowing them to practice facilitating difficult dialogues in excuse me, variety of simulated contexts. So beyond training, VR can be kind of considered for integration into actual mediation and peace building processes as well. For example, in one study by Hassan and colleagues, they found that immersive VR experiences, like for example, virtually experiencing the enemy's gaze, can enhance peace promoting attitudes and emotions. This suggests that like there's this potential that can bridge between conflicted groups by fostering empathy and understanding this like shared understanding. Sorry, yeah, so kind of like fostering this shared understanding. So I think there are many ways that these applications can be broadened up. And in order to kind of tackle this, we came up with our own research. And I will now kind of introduce this. The tentative title is Walking in Another's Carbon Footprint. It's not fully finalized yet, but in this study, we aim to see if uh, VR enabled any kind of like conflict resolution, especially using body swapping, and how it could impact discussions on a polarized topic, reducing. And like the conflict that we chose was climate change, specifically reducing air travel due to climate change. So the way that it went is that the participants were paired and they first argued their stance. And then in the experimental group, they swapped virtual bodies with their partner. You'll see a presentation of the image here, and I will then show a video as well. So they had to then, when they swapped, argue from the opponent's perspective. What this means is that you basically have now are in the body of realistic avatar, by the way, of your other participants, and you can look at yourself from the outside, and you're trying to technically convince yourself looking at yourself from the outside. It's a really interesting experience. So we had a control group that also argued the opponent's view, but without the body swap. And this was followed by final discussion and reflection. So our goal in this experiment was to explore if literally walking in the other's digital shoes and arguing like their point in this process would it foster greater understanding or change the dynamic of the debate. So in the image that you can see as well, each one has kind of posters behind them, and those posters kind of represent the view that they have, and they have a virtual mirror on the side so that not only they can have a first person perspective, they can look to the side and then see their bodies as well. And in the video, you will see that like when they body swap, there is this surprise element, which was quite present in some of the participants. And it was really fun to observe.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that, but I think looking at the news and stuff, it feels like we're not achieving the goals that the scientists are setting, which is, the reaching the, wow, we just got blacked out. Oh my God. What's up?
That was cool.
So now we have to change a little bit of a perspective here.
So this was kind of like the dynamic, and this repeated again, followed by debriefing. So
Yeah, I mean,
what are we seeing in this? So from qualitative feedback, like the participants' essays, Some in the body swap group reported feeling more empathy or a better understanding of their partner's viewpoint. There were comments about discussion becoming less confrontational after the swap, or about humanizing the opposing arguments. Also, many found the experience of arguing from a different embodied perspective strange, but also interesting. So it kind of almost prompts a deeper reflection. Interestingly, when we conducted a formal sentiment analysis on the written reflections, we found that the experimental group, so those who actually did the body swap, tended to have a lower overall sentiment scores. So I think this is a nuanced finding. It doesn't necessarily mean that they felt worse per se, but it could suggest that their reflections were perhaps more measured, less emotionally positive, or maybe like more critical and thoughtful after the body swap experience in opposition, like as opposed to a more straightforwardly positive or negative reaction. I think this contrasts with some initial qualitative impressions of increased empathy, which also, at the end of the day, highlights the complexity of these experiences. So this is an ongoing work. We finalized the studies and we're in the process of finalizing the paper. But this suggests that body swapping in VR can indeed alter the conflict dynamic. Though the exact nature of the change, particularly in the emotional expression, is something that we are still exploring. It does certainly make people think differently, one might say. Um, so we've explored these powerful tools. Now let's take a moment to summarize what the current research landscape tells us, and importantly, what the exciting open questions lie. So what's missing? Let's start with what we know. So first, there is a strong evidence, as we've discussed, that VR can indeed increase empathy across various social divides, whether it's embodying someone of a different race or age or experiencing a different social condition. I think VR provides a unique platform for fostering empathic responses, often more effectively than traditional methods. Secondly, we know that perspective taking, especially when enhanced with VR, can shift attitudes both temporarily and for some in the long run, for example, a week later. So studies have consistently shown changes in implicit biases and stereotypes and reported attitudes immediately after following the immersive experiences, and also a few studies where it was like a week later as well. And finally, as a foundational element, role playing in education, um, if now to be amplified with VR, it can be counted as almost like a proven method for building critical thinking and also communication skills and the ability to analyze complex situations. This whole process of role playing, once again, isn't new, but I think the VR takes it to a new level of realism and engagement. So now, what's missing? Or perhaps more accurately, what do we need to explore further? A significant open question is the longitudinal impact of these VR interventions. While we see immediate shifts in attitudes and empathy, and also like a week after, how long do these changes last? Days, weeks, months? Like, are booster sessions needed? So understanding, I think, this durability of these effects is critical for real world applications. There are a few papers that I mentioned that touch this, but I think we need more research across different contexts. Um, Another quite interesting area is the understanding the nuances of self-recognition moments during these embodied perspective taking processes. So when someone is in a body of the other, or even re-experiencing the conflict from another's viewpoint, um, what happens when they see their own virtual self or recognize their own past behaviors from this new perspective? So these are kind of moments of self-confrontation and or one can say like self-realization. It could be quite powerful catalysts for change, but they need more systematic study because do these moments like contribute to perspective shifts or does it cause cognitive dissonance? Which brings me to the final point. I think we need to delve deeper into the psychological experiences of role and the cognitive dissonance with these VR scenarios. So when you embody someone whose views are antithetical to your own, or you're asked to argue from a position that you disagree with, like in the experiment of the carbon footprint one. This can sometimes really create an internal conflict. So, how do the individuals really manage this dissonance? So, how does resolving this dissonance leads to more profound and lasting change in perspective? Or can it sometimes lead to resistance? So, I think understanding these internal psychological processes is also key to designing more effective interventions. Um, just to say, like these missing pieces, I don't think they're shortcomings, but rather exciting frontiers for future research that would help us refine and maximize the potential of VR and shifting perspectives and resolving conflict in the future. So I think, like, I really do encourage people to kind of look into these and do continue doing research in these realms. But with this, we're gonna move to AI's emergent role in mediation. So, as with many other fields of research, AI can also help as almost like a mediator's assistant because human mediators deal with a lot of information. So, during this whole process, it's a really tasking process. So AI tools can help by analyzing transcripts of discussions, for example, looking for sentiment shifts, identifying recurrent themes, or pinpointing areas of agreement or intense like disagreement, and maybe even like potential hidden interests based on language use. So we could imagine an AI suggesting different ways to reframe a continuous point or surfacing potential solutions based on patterns from past successful mediations, because it could be having access to all these kind of database of previous mediations. And also, like it can quickly retrieve relevant legal information that can be crucial for mediators. Um, we're also seeing AI, particularly large language models, being used for advanced practice and simulation. So it is a great tool and it can act as a sophisticated dialogue partner. So they can simulate various parties in a conflict, like complete with distinct personalities, cultural backgrounds, negotiation styles, and they can provide, I believe, an unparalleled training ground for mediators to practice their skills in this complex multi-party scenarios before facing them in real life. Um, so I think like we have a lot of things ahead, and there's a lot of promise. The potential for more effective and personal training is one of them. Greater accessibility to conflict resolution tools, as well as a deeper understanding into the complex dynamics of conflict that can be done through data analysis, and perhaps even the discovery of novel pathways to resolution that maybe we haven't yet discovered. And this is all great, but this journey also demands prudence and careful attention to significant ethical questions. So, first off, AI bias, of course, is a major concern. If AI systems are trained on biased historical data, they could actually perpetuate and even amplify these biases in VR scenarios or mediation suggestions, which at the end leads to unfair outcomes. So how do we ensure algorithmic fairness is one of the key concerns. Another one is data privacy and security, which is paramount because these systems will handle incredibly sensitive personal data, our communication patterns, our emotional responses, details of our conflict. So I think robust like safeguards are essential. Another risk is over-reliance and de-skilling. So, it's great to have AI as almost like an assistant to the mediators, but these systems, if we lean heavily on these tools, will human mediators lose their nuanced skills, their intuition, their critical judgment? How can we make sure that these technologies are actually helping them improve their skills without necessarily kind of de-skilling them in the process? And perhaps most importantly is preserving the human elements. At the end of the day, conflict is deeply human. Conflict resolution is also deeply human. So can AI truly replicate or substitute for human empathy and also like cultural understanding, and the ability to build trust, which is a continuous compassionate process? And we have these subtle intuitions, especially the ones that the mediators possess. I think this remains a central and critical question. Finally, it's of course the transparency and explainability, aka the black box problem. So, if an AI suggests a course of action or resolution, we need to understand why. This lack of transparency truly erodes trust and accountability. So we have to kind of, when we're using these tools, we cannot just lean on the fact that it just emerged through stochastic reasoning. We have to kind of understand what is the reasoning behind, what are the weights, what are the way that this argument was formed. So I'd say that the technological horizon is exciting, and I take pride in being part of this. And I think like the development and deployment of AI in these sensitive domains, although as promising as it is, must be guided by strong ethical frameworks. And there we need like rigorous testing and also I think a steadfast commitment to human-centered values. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to augment human capabilities and definitely not replace the essential human touch in resolving conflict. So, with this, I'd like to thank you all for joining today's seminar, which is, like Mel said, the first one of various that are going to be continued. And I hope you join the rest of them because all the themes are really interesting and promising. So, thank you for listening.
Oh, thank you very much, San. Now we have about 10 minutes left for questions. There is already what actually the first thing is somebody asked, but maybe you should confirm it, that when the body swap happened, each person saw themselves on the other side. So they were embodied in the other person and they saw themselves on the other side. Can you
Yes.
just maybe repeat that?
Yes, of course. So I can play the video without the audio. So the way is that you see that you are in this perspective, and then you are in your own body. This is like the first moment that they enter, and the opponent is in front of them, or the second party, let's not call the opponent because it's not that much of a conflict. So, and then you see this kind of like fading out happening. That's when, in order for you to kind of change your perspective, and it's the same user now looking at themselves from the outside through the eyes of the other person. So now when they look into the mirror, instead of seeing their own realistic body, they see the other person's body. When they look in front, they have themselves at front. So yes, this was kind of like the body swapping dynamic.
Okay, thank you. Now there's a question from Dr. Martin Walish from University of Birmingham. There's actually three parts to the question. I'll just go one by one. Can you say more about how you've accommodated for effects of first-time VR users?
Okay, so for this, we overall have like within our lab as well, an onboarding process. So we make sure that we do kind of like let's call it an offline training. So regarding the technology, how they use it, the controllers, what are the effects, and of course, simulator sickness, for example, is a common theme. So we make sure to inform them that if that occurs, they can leave and like quit the experiment immediately. And then so they don't start in the room directly. This is actually part of a application that we have in our lab called VR United, where the idea is that we can deploy multiple scenes. For example, there's this one. We have another scene that we actually did an interview for The Economist with David Chalmers, where it's almost like a sushi scene. So there are many shared environments, and in order to kind of join in a room, there's this process of you accessing your avatar to a special code that is only given to you to kind of comply with GDPR and also make sure that these avatars are not shared. So they have this kind of onboarding when they put on the VR headset as well until they arrive into the room. So they are kind of like already accommodated. And also, like the conversation doesn't start right away. We kind of make sure that they first kind of feel comfortable in their virtual bodies and then start. Um,
Look, I think the questioner may have meant, how do you accommodate the fact that maybe some people are more or less experienced in VR? So some of the users may be strong VR users already, and some are completely naive to it.
Yeah, that's in this context, I think we have to acknowledge the fact that there is a surprise factor that we have observed many times. If someone has never used VR and then having this kind of like first time use, there is this, let's say, 5 minute buffer time where they are just trying to absorb what is actually happening around them. We actually, most of the cases, as we're running this in a university that is mainly kind of psychology and psychobiology department, many of the participants are at the end first-time users, believe it or not. So it kind of, I think, generalizes the whole effect and um, kind of balances out, I guess.
Yes, also we know we ask them about their prior VR experience, and we can check between the control group and the experimental group that both groups are more or less the same.
Mhm.
The second part of Dr. Weilish's question was about the sample size and the demographics of the participants.
Okay, so the sample size, it was total of 54 people. And the demographics, I have to say, I don't know it on top of my head, but I think the average age was around 26 or 27. Majority either university students or postgraduates. But um, if you want to know more about it, I would love to chat more about it, just to don't give like false information. As I said, like we are now finalizing the data analysis ourselves, and then hopefully we'll publish the study as soon as we can.
What were the factors for picking the conflict context for the experience?
So that was kind of like the tricky one because at the end of the day, we cannot put someone into this grave conflict, especially when it comes to political contexts, just because there's kind of like the element of being in a university and being in a research context. And at the same time, we wanted to start with a conflict that can feel personal because I think climate change is something that is global enough, that is not nation-based or race-based. It's something that, whether you believe it or not, is really in a societal level. So I think it was kind of like this nice sweet spot of having personal opinions and beliefs regarding the theme while also being able to argument it through scientific research or etc. So that was kind of like this point we take. And also regarding the project that it takes part in, GuestXR, we look into is in other scenarios where they are trying to kind of equalize gain and then come up with almost this dynamic where you have to make certain choices regarding the energy that you consume, the food that you share or kind of distribute among people. And it's, I think, a great test bed for looking into conflict without emotional aggregation or like high emotional states. I would say.
Thank you. Jeppe Moritzen asks, how important is the use of a mirror in regards to measuring embodiment?
It is quite important. There are many studies done by Mel and many other people that, for example, there are many experiments where you can do, for example, Qigong or Tai Chi in front of a mirror and then try to observe the changes in your body. So as we perceive the world, similar. So the way that I see this laptop and I see the world is quite similar the way that I experience in VR. But then you need to have that mirror to have this kind of like effect of embodiment and also presence because it's a nice outer look into where you actually are. So the mirror in the experiment as well, a lot of people, especially after swapping bodies, would kind of like turn to the side and be looking at themselves because it is almost like, how can this be that I am in this body? So it's kind of like affirming and also giving external input into the way they perceive the bodies that they are inhabiting in the virtual world.
Thank you. Diego asks, as people generally can't see their faces, could we have a similar scenario with a video call and a face filter?
Um, if he could elaborate a bit more in what sense, like yeah, I guess yes, but face filter
Well,
meaning
I think that when you look into the video, you see the other person's face. You first of all see the other person's face, and then it's swapped for your face, but it's all done
uh,
in video.
um
That yeah, and he confirms that. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
So basically, can the same experiment be done in video?
I I think like as we've shown in the documentary filmmaking or the 360 video ones as well, as we said, like this kind of um embodiment is a critical tool and our kind of perspectives are through the eyes of ourselves. I think the way that we look into the camera, I also always feel weird when I am like I'm seeing myself talk and I can see the other people's faces as well. I think there is genuinely a radical difference when you are actually in that body. Of course, we can do this kind of like fake video effects, face swaps, etc. But I think there's a greater impact when this is done in with the kind of sensory motor contingencies and the feeling of presence with VR scenarios. But it should be explored. So I think just to make sure, like this is my let's say belief, but it might as well be as effective, worth exploring, I'd say.
Okay, this is the last questions. We need to end in 1 minute. From James, great talk, SN, which I agree with. How do you make the avatar look like the participant? Did you use a face scan, modeling per user? And how tricky was it to ask participants to argue from a different perspective? Did you try to like match their own personal view, or how was it?
Um, So for the first one, within the lab, we have this pipeline, computer vision pipeline, where we just ask one frontal photo in the T pose. And what we do is, in the pipeline that we have, we can generate just like 3D avatars within almost like 30 to 35 minutes. The way it goes is that it's already kind of like rigs. So it's something that first emerged from actually trying to track guitars in concerts using computer vision. That's for another experiment regarding dire straits that Mel did before, and then evolved into actually, can we do this with human bodies? And kind of gave us this ability. There is one publication on that. I'd be more than happy to share that with you as well. But yes, so it's kind of like one single RGB photo and you would kind of like see that the computer vision stitches the backside of it. It's the visual fidelity of the front is of course not as good as the backside, but I think in the videos as well, you can see that it gives some sort of a cohesive look to it. And for the second question, it was tricky to ask participants to argue from a different perspective, but it's really also was impressive to see how easily they kind of adapted to it. I think, of course, there's this moment of change. Even for ourselves, imagine that you've argumented things for continuous 5 minutes, and then not only you are in another body, in the case of the experimental study condition. You're also just trying to kind of have that mental shift of going against everything that you just said and kind of going against your own opinions at the same time. But as it's kind of like taken as role play, people actually ended up getting into the role quite easier than what we've expected. So I think there's this kind of mental mode that we can activate, which maybe can be because of technology, the way that we kind of like developed in the last 10, 15 years via consuming these kind of first person video games as well as series. But it was tricky for a brief moment, but then they would easily kind of just roll with it, I would say.
Okay, thank you. We've run out of time. There are two more questions. Well, I suggest, SN, if you don't mind, if you want to put your email in the chat and you
Yes,
can respond that way.
exactly. Here you go. I'm writing down my email. I'll be more than happy to answer any questions. And here
Okay.
you
And
go.
thank you again.
Thank you.
And we hope to see you again, everyone, in a week's time for the second seminar. So thanks again to everyone who attended, and thanks to Esan and to the GuestXR organizers behind this. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Here. Bye.